All right. Welcome to the channel, guys. So today I have a special guest. Her name is Diana. She's the author of the book in her video right there, 30-Day Stay. And so that book is about midterm rentals. I'm really excited to have her on to the channel today. We're going to be talking all things midterm rentals with a little blurb at the very end about some syndications that she also invests in, but that's going to be a short part. Majority of this video is going to be talking about midterm rentals and everything about it, how to design, how to find, how to locate a good property, and everything in between. So with that said, welcome to the channel. And maybe you can just kind of start off by giving us a little introduction of yourself and what you teach in your social media.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me on. Gosh, I have been in real estate investing now for over 10 years. So I have had such a huge, I don't know, variety of things that I've taught, right? So I started
Yeah.
with arbitrage, Airbnb arbitrage, and then I was doing short-term rentals and co-hosting. I got into investing out of state. And then around COVID, I realized that wow, like nobody's doing short-term rentals because it's COVID and it's not allowed. And we need to still rent our places out somehow. So that's when I did the pivot to midterm rentals. And during that time, I was able to have a bunch of nurses stay in my place, police officers, emergency support, and then also families that were coming back from traveling and they needed to quarantine. And then some families that were schooling at home and working from home and just needed more space. So it was a really interesting time. And after that, realizing that, wow, there's actually a lot of demand for this midterm rental space. And so I have continued doing it. And that's why we wrote a book on it. So yeah, excited to
Yeah.
share.
Yeah, I'm especially really excited about midterm rentals. So we actually did talk a little bit before. I actually paid Ziana for a consultation a couple months ago, and I was introduced to you because we share the same CPA. Investor
Yeah.
friendly CPA is our CPA. Pretty much, I was planning on starting a midterm rental. He's like, I think you should reach out to another client of mine, and so I emailed you, and I was able to talk to you for a little bit, and we didn't talk too much about midterm rentals. I was actually doing something else, but at the same time, I kind of realized that I didn't even know that your book, which I had purchased a couple months before, was your book
Small
until I
world.
talked to you, and then
Yeah.
yeah, and then I realized. So that's really cool. So I actually do own one midterm rental now, which I love. Honestly, I would probably say more than a short-term rental. And we're going to dig into maybe like the pros and cons of each midterm
Sure.
versus short term. But what is your current portfolio kind of look like right now? Are they all midterm rentals at this point? Like, are you completely like midterm rentals, or are you still kind of having a mix of some other stuff too?
No, I have about 5 units that are long-term rentals, and then I have probably another five that are midterm, and like two short-term. So some of my short and midterms are like fluid, right? So depending on where you live, you can have a little bit of a hybrid approach where you mostly midterm, but then you can short-term in the gaps, which helps you to really not have much vacancy.
Right. And then yeah, so it looks like you have kind of a good blend. Is there one that you like love more than like, because you have all three, you have the short-term rental, midterm rental, long. Because I love the midterm rental. I
Yeah.
would say if I could, I would do mostly midterms. But
Yeah, I love midterm too. I think it's great because of just the chillness of it, I guess I would say. Like
yeah,
a short-term rental, sort of the drawback is that those clients are there usually for, I would say an average of 3 or 4 nights. And so there's a lot of turnover, and in turnover, there's this constant needing to teach someone how to use your property. And so there's a lot of the same questions over and over, and a lot of room for error where maybe a cleaner forgets to clean, or somebody has a hard time operating a lock and getting into a property. So there's a lot more emergencies. And with a midterm stay, they often are 3 months, right? That's kind of like the sweet spot. And so if someone's there for that long, they learn the property in maybe those three first days. And then after that, you really don't hear much from them. So I do find it's like a really laid back experience as an operator.
yeah,
And the only real drawback I see is that vacancy can sometimes be hard. So if you're in a place that has really high demand for midterm, I would just like only do midterm. Yeah, that would be amazing. But that's not the
Yeah.
case for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So I invested in one midterm rental in Sacramento, California, which has a lot of hospitals nearby. So I guess one of the main questions I had was like, what's the difference between short-term rental and midterm rental in terms of like the avatar that you're targeting? Like, who is it that is staying at these midterm rentals as opposed to like who's staying at these short-term rentals? And how do you kind of
Yeah.
switch up your strategy to kind of get that
Yeah.
avatar in your place?
Well, the most known avatar in this space is going to be the travel nurse, right? So that is the common avatar, and it really depends on where your property is located. That might not be as true if it's in a rural place, but for most urban areas like Sacramento, you're going to have a lot of travel nurses. And the travel nurse is great because they end up having these 3-month terms that they work, and often they'll have one extension. So you can have that same guest for up to 6 months. And that makes it just a lot easier to work with. Short-term rental can really be anybody, but it's generally someone who's there similar to a hotel for just a few nights. And so they may not be as respectful of your space and they're going to be feeling
Oh yeah.
much more transient rather than someone who's there for multiple months. They start to have this kind of pride of rentership. And it just feels like they want to take care of it. They'll go get batteries. They'll help out more. They'll change a light bulb. They're a little bit more self-sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, some midterms go way longer. I mean, the midterm tenant that we have has been there for 7 months or is staying there for 7 months.
That's
And he keeps
awesome.
extending, right? And he's
Yeah.
paying like maybe a premium on what a long-term tenant would pay. So yeah, it's super cool. We had ants. He like took care of it by himself. Yeah, like we have had a few other issues, and he just kind of takes care of it himself. Whereas with a short-term rental, you're getting like a 2-star review if that happens. You know, it's just more stressful.
Absolutely. They may not even
Yeah,
tell you that there were ants until you get the bad review. Yeah,
yeah.
I have had some midterm people stay over a year, and that can be really great. It's just so easy. There is a
Yeah.
whole nother subset of avatar for the midterm space that people target specifically, and that can be the insurance stays. So when someone has a loss of like an insurance loss, so maybe it's a fire or burst pipes, a flood in their property, they need to rely on their insurance company to pay for that while they're out of their home for multiple months. It could be 3 months, 6 months, sometimes longer. And those clients pay a lot because it's the insurance company that's paying for it. So that
I've
is
heard some
another really
ridiculous
great stay. Yeah.
yeah, I've heard some ridiculous rates, like $8,000
Hmm.
a month for like a 3-bedroom home, which is absolutely crazy.
Hmm.
Why do they pay so much? It's kind of crazy. Is there anything that you can do to like specifically target them or like I know so there's another guy who's kind of talking about midterm rentals. His thing is midterm rentals now. I think maybe you know him. You guys are in a similar space. His name's Jesse. I forget his
Hmm.
last name. But if you
Jesse
type in
Vasquez.
Jesse Vasquez, yeah. I actually saw him at HostCon at Rob's event last year,
Mhm.
and he was
Yeah.
big on like targeting insurance companies. I kind of forget the strategies that he put in place, but he was like, that's kind of his main strategy. It's like going directly to them instead of just creating a listing and then waiting for somebody. A lot of what he
Yeah.
was talking about is like going out and like making connections with different companies and like, asking them to like, or like kind of building a relationship with those companies. That's definitely different or like an add-on to what the midterm rental business is already.
Yeah.
My midterm rental, I just listed it on Furnish Finder, and luckily enough, we were able to find a good tenant within, just a couple of days, I think. What do
That's
you think about that?
definitely
Like, are you more, do you kind of teach like going directly to like those companies or more like I think for the most part, a lot of the markets that I'm looking at, you could just put up a listing and you'll find a tenant within like a couple of days, at least from my experience.
there are different websites that you can list on. So there's the top three, which would be Airbnb, Furnish Finder, and Zillow. Now, Furnish Finder is going to
Oh,
be more
Zillow.
targeted towards the traveling nurse tenant. And it's kind of expanded now, but that's where they were born out of. And then Airbnb, you get more run of the mill. You're going to have people that are traveling for business or even students. Like Airbnb is just really well known. And then Zillow, you end up getting more of those tenant placement agencies. So they might be companies that are placing, it could
Oh,
still be a
interesting.
nurse or a doctor, it could be an insurance company. When you want to get specific into the insurance companies, there's probably another like 10 websites you can list in. And so it just really depends like how much do you want to go down that rabbit hole. There are also people that do tenant placement. So I know someone like in Virginia, she does, I think, Philadelphia and also New Orleans. And then there's another person that I know that's specific to Austin, but they don't manage your property, but they have like a system where they'll place tenants for you. So you pay a premium just for that. But it's great because they're getting these really high paying tenants because they've built out those relationships with the agencies directly and the insurance companies. So
What's
there's
the
definitely
name of
different
these
ways
like
to go about it.
agencies? Like, if I wanted to go make a relationship with that agency, what would I even like Google? Like, what's the name of that placement agency? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, so that's the hard part is that if you wanted to list on like the 8 or so websites, one of them would be ALE Solutions, and that's kind of the main one that you hear Jesse talking about. But what Jesse
Okay.
does is he actually looks up all of the individual recruiters and he's cold calling. And so his
Mm,
course and his group, he's teaching that. It's direct outreach and it's a lot of follow-up. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart, but if it's something that
yeah.
someone really wants to get into, then they can build enough relationships where they can keep a lot of places full. So that's someone
Right.
who maybe wants to set up their own tenant placement agency and then have like a lot of properties underneath them. So it just kind of
Yeah.
depends. It depends on if you want to lean way into it or not.
Yeah, I think it's better if you have like more midterm rentals at that point. Because if you only have one like
Yeah.
me, I don't know if I would like necessarily start cold calling a bunch of insurance companies asking them to stay at my place. Usually you want
Yeah.
to have like a at least a small portfolio of homes so that you can kind of
Totally.
you seem more legit. If you only have one property, it might be a little weird.
Yeah,
But
you
yeah,
have
with
to have
that
the
said,
availability, because if they
yeah,
call
that
you
too,
and they
right?
have placement, you don't want to say no all the time. You want to be able to say yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So with that said, I guess, when you are looking for a midterm rental and just, to give you some context, my audience are mostly, I would say like techies, like high W-2 income earners. They're usually
Mhm.
couples making like 300K. At least that's the type of content that I post because a lot of my content is like tax heavy. A lot of the people
Yeah.
who have like big tax bills will see some of my content and they'll like kind of resonate with it. So we talk about the short-term rental loophole a lot. And I think
Yes.
you are familiar with real estate professional status, right? I think
Yes. I am a real
you
estate
mentioned that you
professional.
are
Yeah.
you are a real estate professional. That is awesome because 95% of the people that I always talk to, like either they don't know what it is or they don't qualify. And maybe we can talk about that in a little bit later on in this video. But before then, I wanted to talk about like when you're choosing a midterm rental, what do you look for in a market? Because I know you talked about traveling nurses as being kind of your main avatar, but is it just hospitals or like because I went with that route. I just looked for the biggest hospital in Sacramento and like bought one right there.
Yeah.
But are there any other factors to kind of consider when choosing a midterm rental market?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is looking for a spot that has two hospitals within 5 miles at least. And that's because it is the easiest tenant to have is that traveling nurse. It's the most
Mhm.
consistent. And so that is a really easy grab. If you want to get really into it, you can look into the different levels of the hospitals. So, for example, a level 1 trauma center is going to be the one that has the most traveling nurses because they have the highest ratio of nurse per patient. Sorry, I was like client,
Yeah.
guest, what are they called? Patients. Um, yeah. And so at those higher levels, if you're a level 1 or 2 hospital, they're going to have a lot of traveling nurses. If it's a level like 4 or 5, you're not going to have many at all. So it is the quality of hospital that you're near. After that is just
Interesting.
kind of understanding what else is around, right? So understanding that demand. Do you have universities that are bringing in events and students and teachers that are coming in for 3 months at a time? So it's kind of just understanding those different parts of what's there. The second thing that I
Right.
think is really important is checking what the comps are. So looking at comparable properties, this is something you can easily do in Furnish Finder, but to make sure that there's not just so much inventory in the midterm space that they're basically charging the exact same as a long-term rental, right? Like you want to make sure that if you're going to make that investment, it could be 20, $30,000 in furniture, that it actually makes sense. You're getting a great return on that furniture. Otherwise, if it's going to be, $200 more per month than an unfurnished property, it is not worth your time, right? So that is
Right.
something to check because there are markets where it's double. And then there's markets where it's very little more.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I guess with that said, you said 20 to 30,000 worth of furniture, but what type of units are you mostly looking for? Like, because I did a studio. So the thing is with the Sacramento property, it's actually like a small duplex, I guess you could say. It was like it's a
Hmm.
3 bedroom on top and then a studio downstairs. And
Yeah.
the plan was to do studio downstairs and then do long-term upstairs, which is what we have now. But then there was actually a property manager who said that like a 3 bedroom would actually be great for midterm rentals too. So what
Hmm.
type of units would you suggest? And for a 3 bedroom, would you also kind of think about having that be a midterm rental? Would it
It
have
could
to be room
be.
by room, or are there actually people who are renting these 3 bedroom places for multiple months?
You'd
Because
be
I can't
surprised.
imagine a
Yeah.
traveler. Okay.
There are
Yeah,
people
I
renting
mean,
the larger ones. So if you're doing nurses, very often they're going to rent a room or they're going to get a 1 or 2 bedroom unit. So just kind of what you've described, if you can find some kind of multi-unit property, that's the best. So like, 2 to 4 units, because then you can have, the expenses of a single family home, but have 4 units paying for it, right? So that's like the best of both worlds. So definitely having those smaller units are easier to fill. Now, if you are looking to do more of that insurance stay, it tends to be families. So if you had a 3 bedroom property, you could have it be like more advantageous for that. So that's something to think
right.
about.
Furnish Finder actually sends you like requests to state your place, but then you also see other people's requests that don't exactly meet your property's listings. You'll see like a request from somebody who's like looking for a 2 bedroom, but then your listing is a 3 bedroom. And so you can reach out to them and like ask them,
Hmm.
hey, like, I have a 3 bedroom. A lot of them, I kind of look at those other requests and there's not too many that are 3 bedroom, but I was looking into maybe doing it room by room. But I was a
Yes.
little worried about maybe having like some issues with like tenants kind of having issues with other tenants. So I don't know. I just went with the long term, I think, just for a little bit more stability. But I may have to reconsider that
Yeah,
because
I
the
think,
midterm rental is bringing in pretty good income compared to what I was
yeah,
expecting.
it depends on where you're at in your investing horizon. So if you're at a place
Mhm.
where you're like, I really want to just get all the cash flow I can, and maybe you have more time on your hands, then doing something more management heavy, like having, 3 individual rooms, that can work great. It can be a lot more money. It's kind of like worth
Mm.
trying. I know
Yeah,
it's
I kind
like
of
one of
regret it
those
now.
scary things. Well, no, I mean, you can plan now. Have
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
wait till that person naturally wants to move out. But what's great about it too is that with long-term rentals, I find that often the damage that happens in between that tenant turnover, so like you need to paint most of the house and maybe replace some of the flooring, that sometimes can eat up your cash flow for the entire year. So long-term rentals suck in that regard. So with a midterm rental, you really don't get the same amount of damage. And that can be really great for turnover. It also just is a lot quicker. I generally turn my midterm rentals in like a day. And
Mhm.
with my long-term rentals, they can be off the market for like 2 weeks, sometimes longer.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. I would say that the type of tenant that you get for midterm rental, you're right, does kind of do a little bit less wear and tear because they don't settle in as much as a long-term tenant would. And
Yeah, and they're not moving
what
furniture, so they're not banging the
right,
walls. It's a
right,
lot of
right.
different stuff.
What about pets? Do you see like a lot of your midterm rental guests bring pets? Like, is that a big thing? Mine didn't
Yes.
have one, but
I find
mostly.
it annoying, but basically you have to allow pets these days. Short-term rental,
Oh,
midterm rental, you have to because there's just so many people traveling with pets. I feel like everybody got a pet during COVID. I don't know what's
yeah,
going on,
that's true.
but yeah, that's important.
Okay, well, maybe what about other tips regarding furniture? The very first Airbnb I set up, I bought all used furniture. That
Yeah.
that unit crashed and burned and did terribly because my pictures were so ugly and everything's like not matching and stuff. So this
Yeah.
time around, I actually bought pretty much everything new and tried to match it as best as I could. And it seems like it's doing okay. Do you have any
Yeah.
like favorite furniture stores or like design tips? Because I am terrible at furnishing. Like a lot of it is from IKEA and even Amazon, but if you have anywhere
Yeah.
better, I
Well, it's actually pretty simple. When we're doing a new unit, we're just going to Wayfair, Target, and Amazon. and we can get everything from those places. Sometimes we'll go in person at the end just to do the last things like some pillows and such, and that'll be like home goods. So we're not going to very expensive stores, and you can still get pretty stylish stuff and make it look really good.
So are you would you be the one furnishing them, or would you like hire somebody to like you just order all the packages and have like pay someone to just kind of do it for you?
Yeah, I did it myself a lot. And then I ended up finding a friend who she's in my book, and she has furnishing services. So you guys can reach out to her if you'd like. But she does all of my places now. We do it together, but she's the designer on it because she's just a little bit better than I am. And really that makes a big difference right now.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that's probably one of, if not the biggest thing is like how you design the place.
Oh yeah.
It can make a
Everything
huge
sells by
difference.
photos.
Yeah, you know what it is too? It's like you can buy the big things like the bed, the desk and the shelves. But I think what really makes design pop is like, having the little accents and like the little plants on the side that kind of, I don't know. I can't do any of that stuff. If it was just me, it would just be a bed and nightstands and that's it. But I think yeah, those things definitely matter. But so what's the name of the service? Is there like a website that I probably
Yeah.
will need that service?
Yeah, her website's called bitsyblue.com, and I can send that to you as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll link it in the description of this video. We talked a little bit on direct marketing. Do you kind of do any direct marketing yourself, or do you have your own, like, I know some people do their own website instead of having Furnish Finder. I think Furnish Finder is like $100 per year. I prefer Furnish Finder, but what do you think about kind of having your own website and driving traffic to your website and all that?
Yeah, there are companies that will make the direct booking websites for you and people that swear by it. I've never really gone down that rabbit hole, and I've tried a little bit in the very early days, but I found that the screening was really difficult because you were now getting people that had no profile, no verifications, and it was a little bit scary.
Sure.
And you have no insurance. These days,
Hmm.
there are companies that you can attach to your direct booking website and they can provide more insurance and screening for you. So that doesn't have to be as much of a concern, but it does feel like a heavy lift to just be like, really pushing your property. And I think for me, my properties are in 4 different states. And so that
Hmm.
is confusing. I think if they were all in Sacramento, it'd be really easy to be, Sacramento stay or something. And then you'd have 10 properties there. So that could be
Yeah.
a real advantage.
Yeah, I think ideally I would do that, but right now I'm buying mostly creative finance, which I know you do as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
And it's hard to like choose a market and only buy in the market because there's not that many two deals available. So I find myself I bought one in Sacramento last year, one in Texas, and it's kind of hard to manage both at this point. But
I have one in Sacramento
maybe
right now. I'm gonna send that to you later.
okay, yeah, yeah, definitely send it to me. So actually, well, I haven't really revealed this at all, but the plan this year was trying to consolidate a little bit more because last year I bought
Mhm.
two single family homes, and it's not that it's a nightmare, but it's just going forward, I'd like to kind of consolidate. So I'm looking for kind of like a small multifamily at this point,
Mhm.
but probably not subject to, but maybe seller finance, just so I can consolidate a little bit. And I'm using the whole real estate professional status because my wife is a real estate professional. We're hoping to bonus
Right.
depreciate. We're waiting for
Mhm.
that tax bill. It's called the Tax Relief Act for American Workers, I think, and that's the one that's going to
Aren't we
bump bonus
all?
depreciation. Yeah, everybody. Yeah, we are like at least I am watching that bill like a hawk right now. It's just sitting on the Senate floor, being waiting for it to be voted on. Maybe I want to shift the discussion a little bit now to kind of talking about creative finance, which I know you also kind
Sure.
of dabble in yourself.
Yeah.
So what's your involvement with creative finance and kind of what do you do with it?
So what I'm called is a unicorn realtor, right? Unicorn agent. So I am a licensed realtor in Colorado, but I sell creative finance deals nationwide. And so I specifically do short-term rentals, mostly. Sometimes I find mid-term rentals, but I specialize in turnkey furnished legal short-term rentals. And like you said, they pop up all over the place and it's not super consistent. So I can't just be like, oh, I'm going to be only Smoky Mountains. It's like, no, I have them all over the country. But it also keeps it really fun. And yeah, I
Yeah.
specialize in creative finance, but I find that most of what I do are subject twos.
W2 is super, super popular right now. And it's probably,
Hmm.
the number one topic I've been talking about in my profile for past couple months at least. This is important because my audience are, again, high W-2 income earners. They're mostly looking to do the short-term rental loophole.
Yeah.
And the short-term rental loophole is mostly effective, I guess, or I kind of suggest trying to go for properties that are more than $500,000. I know
Yeah.
like Rob Built, if you guys don't know who that is, he's a big Airbnb YouTuber. He's doing a service where he's kind of, finding subject to deals. But I don't know if a lot of them are, I mean, lots of properties in Texas aren't really over $500,000. I don't know what other markets he's doing. I'm actually trying to start a service now where I find properties as well for my clients. But
Hmm.
mostly, again, over $500,000. So Smokies has been a very popular market where I've been kind of looking because a lot of the properties there are 600, $800 million properties. The building value there is quite high in comparison to the land value. So it's very tax beneficial for some of these high W-2 income earners. Do you have kind of some favorite markets that you're kind of looking for these deals in right now, or like some popular ones, I guess?
Yeah, so I think because I'm an investor first, I think about the long term of it. And I think when people are looking at cost segregation, they're looking for that bonus depreciation in that year, which is great. But once you buy that property, you don't want to turn around and resell it because then you'll have that recapture of all that tax benefit. So you'd really like to hold it 3 to 5 years. And if you're going to do that, that property actually needs to cash flow or at least break even. But what I find is that the Smokies, you have to be really careful. A lot of those properties aren't doing very well. So the market I like the best right now is the Catskills in New York. I do find different pockets here and there and other places that work well, but I'm really considering how is it performing on top of what can I get in tax benefits.
Definitely, there's a saying, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. Don't make investing decisions only on the tax benefits, but also,
Yes.
the number one consideration is like, whether it's a good investment first off. But yeah, so I guess so that's kind of the whole my current pitch to my audience is like if you can combine subject to with short-term rentals, so you get the best of like the interest rates, you're paying down your loan at a significant rate, you got a short-term rental that's cash flowing like a couple $1,000s per month, and then you get this humongous tax benefit. That's like the trifecta. If you can get all three of those in one deal, that can just like propel you forward in terms of your net worth. And if you're doing one or two of those per year, that's just yeah, I think that's just a recipe for building your net worth really quickly. So that's kind of
Yeah.
what I've been talking about lately.
Well, and that's the thing that I would say is the difference between the short and midterm rentals is that even though midterm rentals are easier to manage and someone might like that more because they have a W-2 job, the short-term rental is what's going to get you the tax benefits. Midterm rental, you only are eligible for tax benefits if your income is from properties already that you're offsetting. So you'd have to have a lot of other properties, right? Or you're a real estate professional, then we can write off long term and midterm is seen as long term. Yeah,
Yeah.
they might be stuck in that short term rental game for a while.
Yeah, that's why a lot of the consultations I talk about, I always kind of push people towards like maybe your end goal should be like eventually down the road, try to get real estate professional status. Right now, you're a W-2, but maybe
Yeah.
when you acquire enough properties, maybe, you want to chill, maybe quit your job and then become a real estate professional. And then from then on, you don't need to buy any more short-term rentals. Maybe for the few of us that are real estate professionals now, or maybe like people who are planning on eventually becoming real estate professionals, if you're a W-2 employee right now, maybe we want to talk about like some cool strategies you can do with real estate professional status. So, like you mentioned, you get the same tax benefits. Well, since we claim I'm not a real estate professional, my wife is, but because we file
Yeah.
jointly, we get it. So, what's kind of your strategy with real estate professional status? Like, how do you really use it? There's so many ways,
Yeah.
but how do
I
you
mean,
use it?
I'm still learning. And I think for me, it has to do with how long I've been investing. Now, I've been investing over 10 years. I've had a lot of properties in lots of states, and I'm getting to be a tired landlord. And so for me, what I'm mostly interested in is finding stuff that's truly passive. And I think the issue is that a lot of people think rentals are passive, and sometimes they have their moments of feeling passive, but they're not. And then even if you have a long-term rental with a manager in place, it's still not entirely passive. So I am moving towards investing in syndications for that reason, because it is something where you vet it up front, but once you hand your money over, for better or for worse, you don't have any control anymore. And so I'm just really enjoying that. And as a real estate professional, we get the tax benefits from these syndication investments. And it's more or less depending on what the vehicle is that you're investing in. Before we got on this call, you and I were talking about mobile home parks. Mobile home parks have the highest amount of bonus depreciation as an asset. It's not as much as if you bought an actual rental property. So, a lot of people are still going to prioritize buying rental properties. But for someone who is not wanting to do that and wanting to go more passive, getting into syndications is great.
I know exactly what you mean. So I recently jumped on a call with a syndicator. So they're doing, I forget the name of the syndication, but they're doing a fund, which a fund is basically a collection of different, like they have self-storage units, they have mobile home parks. There's maybe like 10 or so different properties, and they kind of combine them all into one fund, which you can invest in. And what I've heard from them, and they even sent me like an example K1. The K1 is kind of like a summary of profit and loss that you'll receive as the investor if you invest into a syndication. But they sent me an example K1 of somebody who had invested $100,000 into their syndication, and in the first year, they received about $70,000 in passive losses. So some syndications kind of give you like this percentage number saying like if you invest X amount of dollars into a syndication, this is the percent that you're going to get back in passive losses. So for you, if you had invested $100,000 into that syndication, you received a $70,000 passive loss, you're able to use that how? Are you using that to offset rental income, or are you using that to offset maybe any other form of active income? How do you use that?
Yeah, so that's the cool thing is that my active income is still real estate professional income because my active income is selling real estate. It is consultations in real estate. It is a book on real estate. So for me, I can offset all of it. So that works really well when you're real estate professional status. For other people, you can offset your rental income with rental property, right? And you can offset syndication income with syndications that you're buying and getting that cost segregation on. So if you don't have real estate professional status, you're kind of in a narrower lane of what you can use it for.
Could you buy a very profitable short-term rental in the Catskills, which maybe in year one, you're going to take bonus depreciation on that property. So it's probably going to, that property itself is going to report a huge loss. But then starting
Yeah.
year two, you're not going to have that huge bonus depreciation deduction. So that year two, you might actually report a very big profit at the end of the year. Could I take some of those profits, invest it into this mobile home park fund, get my passive losses, and use to offset the income from this profitable short-term rental?
Yes. If you have real estate professional status. And that's the thing is that people love to just talk about like, oh, I don't pay taxes. But it's like, if you want to not pay taxes, you have to basically take everything that you earn and go reinvest it constantly, right?
Yeah,
You've got to be on that
that is true.
treadmill. And so I find it's a little deceiving when people are like, oh, I just bought a fancy car. I did this and I don't pay any taxes. It's like, well, you pay less, but it doesn't fully go away unless you are really investing everything you make. But it definitely is the way that we do it. Every extra dollar we have, we're looking where we're going to allocate it for some sort of syndication generally.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny that because basically I started looking into it after you kind of mentioned it to me first, and I was like, I wonder why mobile home parks. She said that the tax benefits were good, but so I looked into it. It's absolutely insane. Mobile home park tax benefits are probably the best I've ever seen from any real estate asset class in terms of the first year tax benefits.
Hmm.
Again, if they were to sell that asset, in year two, which they don't. Usually for the mobile home park funds, they hold them for like 10, 15 years. And you're kind of in it for the long run. But they do actually do, at least from the fund that I was looking at, they actually tried to refinance around like the 7, 8, 10 year mark ish. And you basically get back your original investment, but you still, even though you got all your money back, they still give you like dividends, or they still give you payments, right? Like returns.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
invested in one last year that they were aiming to refinance in year two after they'd done a
oh
ton of
wow.
improvements. And so you would get all your money back, but it was going to be a 5-year hold. So the next 3 years, you'd have that money back where you can have it already reinvested and working elsewhere, but you're still making money every single month off of the shares that you own until they decide to sell. And then, yeah, then you would get another, bit of equity there.
So I made a video before saying how like I would only invest in like maybe a short-term rental, midterm rentals, and well, I guess the three midterm, short-term, long-term, and then syndications. Actually, now that I think about it, that's pretty much everything. But for the
It's
syndications,
not
like,
everything. There's so much
well,
more.
yeah, that's true. The thing about syndications is that I can't get myself to choose one because there's so many. How do
Mm.
you like what criteria did you use to kind of choose one? Did you talk to a lot of the previous investors in that syndication? I've probably looked at like 10 of them by now, but I just can't pull the trigger because I just feel like I can go
Yeah.
find a better one.
Well, there's a Bigger Pockets published book called The Hands-Off Investor. Is that what it's called? Yes.
Yeah.
And that one talks all about doing due diligence on syndications or funds. I think that's a really important one because it's pretty complicated. I would say, in short, that it's all about the operator. So, of course, first, I would love to just invest in mobile home parks, but there's only one operator that I feel really good about. I guess there's a second one, but the second one requires that your minimum investment is 100K. And up until
Mm.
now, I've been doing a lot of 50K investments. And by the time I have 100K, I've already spent that 50K, right? Because I just don't save enough. So I think
Mm.
that's something to consider for people is that when you're looking at something, do you have to be an accredited investor or do they take non-accredited, which is few? So you need to kind of know where you stand there. What is the minimum investment? The lowest I usually see is about 25,000 and then they go up to usually 100,000 as an entry. So, what can you actually afford to invest? And then third, that's really important. Well, I guess it's also looking at the asset, right? You want to know, am I investing in boutique hotels or multifamily, which multifamily has done really poorly in the last couple of years. So I'm very
Yeah.
skittish of that. Or, self-storage or, Airbnb funds. There's so many different things under just a syndication. And the last thing,
Yeah.
which is actually the most important, is the operator. So I'm not even really looking at the asset as much as I'm looking at who is the team who's running this and what's their experience and what's their track record. So I tend to invest just in the same couple of groups because I already have experience and I trust them. So it's less
Mhm.
about what they actually give me as an asset because I'm just really trusting of them and how they're taking care of my money.
I see what you
Yeah.
mean. Yeah, I think the kind of the approach of the operators is super important because some operators are really like aggressive and some are much more conservative. So you just kind of have to find
Hmm.
your the right operator there.
I'd
I
say if you're
actually
looking, you
yeah.
can reach out to me. I can tell you who I've been investing with. So that might help just to kind of narrow it down.
Yeah, yeah. Is there kind of a stigma with like sharing these? I don't know. Like I haven't met any other
Nope.
syndication investors pretty much. I just remembered the syndication is called Sunrise, I believe, the mobile home park one, I think. I could be
Hmm.
wrong. But it's crazy because you mentioned the multifamily space right now is getting crushed. I'm not going to go into maybe the macroeconomics of why that's happening, but I did hear that there is a relatively large. There was actually a post on Bigger Pockets about this that they're doing what's called a capital call, and it's a 20% capital call. I don't really know too much about that. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, so a capital call just means that you make your initial investment, say it's $50,000, and then if the fund is not doing well or the syndication is not doing well, they are going to go back to their investors and say, "Hey guys, I'm sorry you need to bail us out. We're asking everybody to contribute X amount more." So maybe that's another 50K or 10K or whatever. And at that point, you have a choice. And so if you don't, it dilutes your ownership, right? Because they've now flooded it with a bunch more money. And a lot of times people feel sketchy about contributing into something that's already performing poorly. So it can be an uncomfortable situation. And a lot of times people don't have enough notice. So something that's
Mhm.
happened in syndications, unfortunately, is that the operators are embarrassed. And so they're feeling like I don't want to tell them until I absolutely need to. And so they often are funding the deal themselves and trying to save it. And then instead of saying, hey guys, I'm seeing that like maybe in, a year we might need some capital if things don't change, they let them know like 2 weeks later, like, if you don't give us capital, we're going to go bankrupt. It's like, that's not the way to do it. So that
Yeah.
has been happening in the multifamily space because of the interest rates being so high now. And so many of them had very short-term debt and they were expecting to be able to refinance into a 3 or 5% loan, and now they're 9%.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. But the good thing is that not all syndications do multifamily. Like, for example, yours is a mobile
Totally.
home park. So you're pretty much good. I mean, mobile home parks is kind of touted as this recession resistant asset class because it's kind of like the last frontier before you're like, you can't afford anything cheap. There's not anything cheaper than a mobile home, pretty much, right? In terms of living. So it's
Yeah.
relatively resistant to recessions. But yeah, that's super awesome. Well, I think that's pretty much all I had today. Did you have anything that you wanted to share maybe before we hop off here?
Nothing particular. I mean, I'm happy to have people reach out to me if they want to know more about creative finance or midterm rentals or just different syndications that I'm investing in. I am also in triple net lease syndications that are distribution warehouses. So there's things that don't seem very sexy on the outside, but they're very, very safe and they end up doing really well over time. So it's good to
Yeah.
have that diversification.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I definitely need to look more into the syndication space. I think we wanted to kind of dip our feet into it this year. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'll make a video or we'll see. Any last helpful resources for maybe plugging your own book or your services or anything that might help
Yeah.
my audience out?
Yeah, so the book is 30 Day Stay. You can get it at biggerpockets.com/30-day stay. If you want 10% off, you can use my name, Ziana, at checkout. And that's a real start to finish A to Z, everything you need to know to start a midterm rental. It includes
Yeah.
furnishing and all of that. So definitely a great resource. I'm working on a book right now for creative financing, but I do have a mini course. So if anybody wants to just have a consultation with me or learn more about my offerings, you can go to my website, zianamcintyre.com.
Well, that's awesome. And then how can people find you? What's your
Yeah.
socials?
At Ziana McIntyre. I'm most active on Instagram, but I do a lot on Facebook. You'd actually be surprised. There's so much in the
Oh,
creative
really?
finance world on Facebook.
That is true. Creative finance is mostly on Facebook. I actually found my property
Mhm.
on Facebook as well.
Yeah.
I guess maybe Facebook's making a comeback. We'll see. Anyways,
Yep.
I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for joining today's video. And I will just say that, Ziona does do consultations. I did schedule one with her. I've been doing a lot more one-on-one consultations. I just think, I mean, this conversation alone, I've learned so much. And it's only been like 45 minutes that, and
Mhm.
I just think it's really, really worth it to pay for these consultations. It's I actually do offer consultations as well, but yeah, just so even like a 30-minute conversation can get you so much further like along the road on your path or your journey. I just think it's super helpful. And again, I wouldn't even have known about mobile home park syndication if it wasn't for you. So
Yeah.
just that alone was well worth the cost of the consultation. And there's just so many things that can little nuggets that come up during your consultation calls that would just super valuable. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, well, thanks again for joining. And yeah, I think that's it for today's video. Go check out her book, and I'll leave a link in the description. But thanks for joining again.
Bye.